Today we're digging into the story of two hidden heroes, Shiphrah and Puah. These were women who chose courage over fear, faith over submitting to a tyrant. This story takes place in a time when the Israelites had become slaves under a new Pharaoh, and this Pharaoh knew nothing of Joseph or the legacy of his family. We're told that these slave masters made the Israelites' lives bitter. Yet the more they were oppressed, the more they thrived. And this struck fear into the heart of Pharaoh. We're told that he was in dread of the children of Israel. It seems a bit crazy, doesn't it? That Pharaoh, the most powerful man in Egypt, was afraid of people he was unable to control. And as so often happens, what happens next was dictated by his fear of these people he was unable to control. So he summoned two women, Shiphrah and Puah, the midwives to the Hebrew women, and he commanded them to kill every Hebrew baby boy at birth. Can you imagine that? These women stood in front of the most powerful man in the land and were being told to commit murder. They were ordinary women. They spent their days bringing life into the world, and now they were being asked to take life. But Shiphrah and Puah feared God, and when faced with this choice between obedience to Pharaoh or obedience to God, they chose the latter, because they realised that doing what was right outweighed following Pharaoh's command, so they didn't follow his orders. Acts 4:19 puts it this way: doing what was right in the sight of God. It must have taken immense courage to stand up to this man who was so powerful he was regarded as a living god by the Egyptian people. But these women knew the difference between a man who proclaimed himself as a god and the real God of heaven. And when it came to a choice between the most powerful man in the land and the one true God, they chose God. They could not know that after 400 years of oppression at the hands of the Egyptians, Israel's liberation was at hand. All they knew, all they could see was what was in front of them: a powerful ruler who was asking them to do something unconscionable. But faith and their conscience called them to trust in what they could not see: the God who is always writing a bigger story. Of course, Pharaoh soon realised that baby boys were still being born to the Hebrews, and so he summoned Shiphrah and Puah again. When he demanded an explanation, they told him that the Hebrew women were too vigorous and gave birth before the midwives could even arrive. It wasn't exactly a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. Theirs was a quiet act of defiance, ordinary words on the surface, but filled with wisdom and a refusal to bow to Pharaoh's command. Shiphrah and Puah couldn't have known how their act of defiance would contribute to the liberation of the Israelites, but they trusted that God would honour their faithfulness, and he did. Pharaoh's fear of the Israelites led him into cruelty and oppression, while Shiphrah and Puah's fear of God led them into courage and compassion. And in fact, because Shiphrah and Puah feared God, God eventually blessed them with families of their own. Pharaoh tried to destroy a nation. God fought for his people and won the battle, and he used two women who trusted him to begin their liberation. What I love about this story is that Shiphrah and Puah were ordinary women, yet God wrote their names into his story. Their quiet faith, their hidden obedience and courage were never unseen to him. I think the story reminds us that we don't need to be strong or powerful to make a difference. We just need to be willing to stand up for what's right. And when we fear God, we can find the strength to do what is right, even when it's hard. Because God sees our faithfulness and he honours it. And he can use even the quietest acts of courage to shape history. Friend, I hope this story has encouraged you today. If it has, I'd love for you to share it with a friend who might need to hear it too. And if you haven't already, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and leave a review if you found it helpful. If you've ever felt overlooked or wondered if your quiet obedience or small acts of faith really matter, I'd love to invite you to explore more in the book based on this podcast season, Invisible Women of the Bible. It explores the stories of women just like you, women who struggled, hoped, persevered, yet were seen by God. Until next time, remember, God can use even the smallest acts of faith, of courage, of doing what's right in His sight to shape history. And He isn't finished with your story yet.